portion is for is it okay if I start over, because I do want it to be recorded? Thank you. So I'm here to talk about Proposition 2, which is a State Facilities Bond Act. And this is not a new tax levy on us. It's from the California state budget. And it is a school facilities bond act that will have implications for the state, but also specific implications for CCUSD that I'll talk about. With respect to the state, it's a $10 billion bond, but 8.5 of that will go to TK through 12 districts. So 1.5 is for community college, which I also support, but does not apply to CCUSD in particular. Of that 8.5, $4 billion is for modernization. The other 3 is for 3 point something is for new construction. And the numbers are slightly variable because there is a 10% set aside for small districts, which we do not qualify as. And that $4 billion that is for modernization, I think, is the most important for us to be thoughtful of in terms of why, if this bond passes, it would really help Culver City Unified. So I think everyone knows that we successfully passed Measure E very recently with the help of this club. And that got the Culver City Unified School District $358 million in tax levied bond funds. And the majority of those funds are slotted for modernization projects, in contrast to new construction. So that $4 billion at the state level is the bucket from which we would be eligible for matching funds, which we're only eligible because we secured this bond. So if we had not successfully passed the bond, we wouldn't be eligible for any of the state funds, and I would still support us supporting the measure because I believe in public education and funding it, of course, but I especially hope we can support it as a club and as individuals in this case, because CCUSD will get so much bang for their buck, and I will get specific very soon. So back to the 358 that we got passed. It's excellent that we got it passed because now we're eligible, period, for matching funds from the state if Prop 2 passes. It's excellent that we got it passed before November, as in just back in March, because that means we are now way ahead in line, because there are 50 to 60 districts at least who are trying to get their bonds, their local bonds, passed on the November ballot with Prop 2, which means that they'll be way behind us in the line for what does end up being a first come, first serve matching pipeline. So we have a website that is called futurereadyccusd.org that talks about the improvements that we plan to engage in. 200 million of those are modernization. And again, that's probably the bulk of what we would get matching funds for from the state. And when I did the math today with our new Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, it looks like we can get 90 to 100 million, so almost half probably, of matching funds of that 200 million slated from the state if Prop 2 passes, which then of course means that we have an extra 100 million beyond the 358 that you all helped us pass in March, which makes our bond now become close to a $460 million bond, where it was a $360 million bond. And it's a huge deal for us. We will get so much more out of it if we get Prop 2 passed. So the part that I'm talking about is the modernization costs. The part that I haven't yet talked about is new construction costs, which most people find to be more sexy, I will be honest. We have all these like backlogged modernization needs, like roofing. You've heard about floods. You've heard about probably rodents. What else have we talked about? Blacktops, HVAC. What are the most urgent needs you all have heard from your community members with respect to the school? Oh, that's my Google timer. Anyway, so I will wrap up and let you guys ask me questions and just screen share very quickly so that you know where to look for the calculations that I am referring to. And the long and short of it is that the state school districts have a lot to benefit from if we pass Prop 2, and CCUSD in particular has at least $100 million of extra money if Prop 2 passes that we can use for our own construction. And I'll share this screen and people can raise their hands at this time. So here is a site called CCUSD, I'm sorry, Future Ready CCUSD. And it shows the probable costs of our, and what I'm going to select right here is modernization, which is the bulk of the work that we need to do. I filtered, this is under a tab called funding, under probable costs, filtered by cohort all, school all, category modernization, task all. It's quite complicated. I can show you again if you want. And then multiple selections, I filtered by initial. And you see here, we have almost $200 million. That's where I got that number of modernization costs. Okay, go for it, Cynthia. I can't, you're muted.
I was having a little trouble with my audio, and so I may have missed some of what you said, but just to be clear, we're getting this money, but it's as a bond, so we have to pay it back. Is that not how this one works?
Well, Measure E, as individual taxpayers, we do, but the Bond Act at the state is a budget allocation through. So the budget is already there, or already contributing to it as taxpayers. And if anybody else understands that in more detail than me, please jump in. But I understand this is not going to be a new levy like the bond that we are currently paying called Measure B or Measure C.
It's not double, it's doubling what we can use, but it's not doubling what we owe.
Correct. That's, yeah. I think that's the language of act. It's an act. They're going to reallocate from their budget already in the coffers. Well, slated to be in the coffers. Was there another question? I thought I saw maybe. Yes. Hi, Jeff.
Hey, so I have heard the only criticism of this I've heard, because like who's against schools, right? Is that it's not, I know, is that it's not great from it's not as good as it could be from an equity standpoint.
This is a fair critique, and I'm showing you the Cal Matters piece. I'll put the link in the chat that speaks to that. It could be much more equitable than it is. It's true. And I think there is potentially some litigation in the pipeline around that. Not that would stop the bond from being in place, or for allocations to begin, or at least the pipeline to be reviewed. But the percentage may shift if litigation is successful. It's true. Right now, there's really only a sliding scale based on low income students in the range of like a 5% difference. It should be much more along the lines of, you know, a range of 5 to 90% reimbursement instead of right now the range is from 60 to 65% reimbursement, which is that's not enough of a difference considering the difference in needs for districts. So it's a fair critique, but yes, we still need to pass it.
Great. I appreciate having the details from you on that. Can we go on to Prop 5, the local tax and bond measure reform? And Cynthia and Matthew, I believe you're both speaking on this. So let me put you in the spotlight now.
Would you like me to go first, Cynthia, or would you like to go first?
Please, company comes first.
Oh, thank you, Cynthia. I wanted to thank Leah for inviting me tonight and for you all for having me. My name is Matthew Hilliard. I use he, him, his pronouns. I live way far away from you in Siskiyou County, which is on the Oregon border. I am Modoc and Yishukin by background. I'm a member of the Klamath tribes, and I work for the Karuk tribe. Full disclosure, the Karuk tribe is supporting Prop 5, and I'm also a local elected official. I am a member of the former member of the Mount Shasta Parks and Recs District, former member of the Mount Shasta City Council. I'm also an executive board member of KDEM from Assembly District 1, and I am also involved in tribal government as well. So Proposition 5 is a process initiative on how local government bond bills will be able to be passed. So currently, bonds require a supermajority of a 2/3 vote when they go up for votes. Proposition 5 would lower that threshold to 55%. And this would be for things like Parks and Rec districts, water boards, local transit districts, rapid transit districts, also for affordable housing initiatives. And so this really is a process initiative. It's not a bond in itself. It's for future government, local government funding. So this is a constitutional amendment proposed by the legislature that will be approved by the voters. And so if passed, it would be easier for local governments to pass taxes or issue bonds to develop affordable housing. It does not create a simple majority. It requires a 55% majority. So still requiring what we would consider to be a clear majority mandate from the voters with that 55%. So there's a couple of caveats and amendments that were passed. So the 55% threshold can only be applied to bonds, not new taxes. So this is one thing that the Howard Jarvis Association is really pushing out in their propaganda against Prop 5 is that it is going to create all these new taxes. That's not true. So taxes placed on the ballot by the legislature will still require that supermajority, that 2/3 vote, and taxes by the initiative process through the people collecting signatures and stuff like that will still require a simple majority like Prop 1 did. And bonds using the 55% threshold cannot be used on buying houses or 2 to 4 unit properties. Only properties that are used for low income home ownership programs or special needs housing can be used under this caveat, under this new, what Prop 5 would be doing. This was requested by the realtors in order for it to be put on the ballot in exchange for them dropping opposition to this. So it was kind of it was very much debated and there was a lot of people against it, but I think this was a good thing in order to get the bill on the ballot. This reduces fear of eminent domain coming in and taking over people's homes and things like that as well. And I think the last amendment that got put in was undeniably a good thing, which is, I don't know if this was so much in Southern California, but we saw this in Northern California in the Oakland area where money from this cannot be used to subsidize stadiums, big sports stadiums for private owners that are wanting the taxpayers to build their stadiums for them. So this is undeniably a good thing. So to give a little bit of the other side, I'm very much in support of this, but the opponents claim that the measure's language is too vague and could lead to huge tax hikes on infrastructure products that don't aid all Californians. The main money behind the opposition is the Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association. Cynthia, thank you.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, thanks for the update. I heard there was an amendment, and yeah, according to the Secretary of State's office, the realtors had $3 million in the bank ready to spend on this, and they quietly slunk away after that. You know, fun fact: this 2/3 majority required for the bonds, that's recent. It has not been that way for the entire history of the earth. This came out of Prop 13. Now, Prop 13 passed with 64.8% of the vote. Okay, 64.8 vote imposed a 66.67 requirement. I just find that ironic. Anyway, many worthy bond measures have been defeated behind this, and it's time to change it. The Jarvis people are saying, oh, this will diminish the people's voice. Well, it will diminish a minority to keep a majority from having infrastructure projects and affordable housing. That's what it'll do. Prop 5 specifically limits administration to 5%. There'll be annual reports to the California State Auditor. That's for this of the spending. There'll be people on oversight committees who will be required to have related education. I mean, there's all kinds of safeguards here. And I don't think that definition of infrastructure is vague. I looked at the list. It looks pretty specific to me. They're just being silly.
I can say one more thing.
Yes, please.
So this is something that is really going to help our deteriorating infrastructure for parks and recreation, for transportation districts. A lot of these areas, I left and resigned from the Parks District in order to push some bonds through that. Here in Mount Shasta, we have a beautiful place called City Park. It has the headwaters of the Sacramento River. It's a beautiful park. It's had sewer problems for the past 20 years, and we've had 4 different bond measures that have gone up in order to fix that. They've all passed with 63, 64, 65% of the vote, just short of that super majority that's needed. We were going to put it on the ballot for this time, but we are holding off, hoping that Prop 5 will pass in order to put it on the ballot in a future election. This is something that's really going to help our deteriorating infrastructure throughout the state, and just give local governments that power. And like Cynthia was talking about, this is not something that has been around forever. This has been around since Prop 13. And so this is very much something that the Howard Jarvis Association is going to put a lot of money in. At this time, it's $3 to $5 million that they're going to be putting into this bill. Hopefully the realtors now are going to help with passing the bill, because they got a lot of their amendments in there. So we're hoping that will come through. But that is it. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm voting for this thing.
Thank you both. Does anyone have any questions?
Isn't it true? Isn't it still true that if this passes, then the 2 bond issues that are on the same ballot will also only require the 55%?
Oh, sorry about that. So the Attorney General has put out like something about that it can't be a simultaneous thing. So
Okay.
This would only go for things going forward. And this is more for local government funding. There's a different process when they are put on the ballot through the legislature. But yeah, the Attorney General did put that opinion out. So Ronnie and Tom has their hand up, I think.
Jarvis has hurt us much more than it has ever helped us. Please get this passed. Thank you.
I'm with you, Ronnie and Tom, on that. It's the lingering effects of Prop 13 have been felt throughout our state. I mean, I work in education. I know that it has dwindled, funding for education, for infrastructure, parks and rec districts, for transit districts, all of those things. So this would be a really good way. I mean, and it's the will of the voters. I think, people getting 60% of the vote and a lot of these things. And with our research, we found that the majority of these were not failed. They were not less than 50%. Over 70% of the bills that have been put up by local infrastructures, local governments for infrastructure have passed. They just haven't passed with the supermajority. So they think about 65% of those bills would have passed if the 55% bill, if this Prop 5 was in place. Like Alfred was telling us in Berkeley, there was an affordable housing initiative that cleared the 55% threshold, but just couldn't get to that supermajority. So I think this would be undeniably a good thing. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you both. So Cynthia, let me hand off to you to talk about the minimum wage if you'd like. Or I'm not sure if you or Pete are going to do this.
Oh, I think that's me. I need to turn on my light though, just sit here.
Nice shirt.
Oh, yes. Oh, well, and I've got a nice, I don't know if you can see my sticker. How cool is that? I love our new stickers. Yeah. Prop 32 is the Living Wage Act. And what it aims to achieve ensure that workers receive wages that will financially support them and their families. It'll raise the minimum wage from the current $16 an hour to $18 an hour by 2026 for all workers. Prop 32 and Prop 32 will continue as is current law to adjust the minimum wage for inflation. Fun fact, the federal minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour, as it has been since 2009, because it is not indexed for inflation. To put it in context, in 2016, California increased our state minimum wage and tied it to inflation. And over these years, it has now crept up to $16 an hour. More recently, higher minimums have been won for healthcare workers and for fast food workers. This initiative seeks an increase for all workers. That's one difference. So a yes vote will support increasing the state minimum wage to $18 per hour by 2026 for all employees. And thereafter, it'll continue to be adjusted for inflation. A no vote opposes the initiative and will retain the current minimum wage. Who supports it? The committee that supports it. I love this name. Working Hero for the Living Wage Act, PAC. It is supported by the California Democratic Party. And Joe Sandberg, an entrepreneur and anti-poverty activist. There's an extraordinary combination, but he put his money where his mouth is. He contributed $10 million to try to get this passed. And Assembly Member Lorena Gonzalez Fletcher, Democrat of District 80, championed this through the legislature. Opposition from, guess who? The California Republican Party. The National Federation of Independent Business doesn't like it much either. What supporters say? Supporters say for more than 12 years, the federal minimum wage has been stuck at $7.25, while worker productivity has increased. If the minimum wage had increased at the rate of productivity growth since 1960, it would be $24 an hour right now. Californians cannot support a family on the current minimum wage of $16 per hour or $33,280 per year for people working full-time. Single parent living in California with 2 children would need to make $50 per hour to get by. But our state's current minimum wage is only $16 an hour. What the opponents say? Oh, you're going to love this. John Kabatek of the National Federation of Independent Business, who grouses that the market, not the government, should be setting wages, said, quote, "Let the market dictate this," meaning minimum wage, "and let's stop sending the message that mediocrity is a pathway to professional success in California." Oh, please, mediocrity? I remember when we used to call those people essential workers. Yeah, so I'm voting yes on Prop 32. Any questions that I hope I have answers to?
Tad, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Cynthia, for a compelling presentation. I only half listened to your presentation because I always vote in favor of minimum wage increases. And you sort of addressed this, but I do want to ask very directly, what do we say and how do we fight for this in the face of the twin arguments that I'm sure are already being made and will be made? One, we'll have to fire workers. People will lose their jobs if you make us pay them more. And two, businesses will leave California. They can't afford to compete in California. So the race to the bottom will happen.
Yeah, in droves.
So help me counter that, please.
Well, there was, I should put the link in the chat to the Cal Matters article. They went down to analyze that, and they're like, they're kind of like, yeah, but that's what they said when the minimum wage went up to $15 an hour. And gee, doesn't seem like that's actually happened.
Cynthia,
Um,
thank you so much. I
Oh,
noticed that Fatima's here. Sorry.
Just one more thing, that I would love to tell you is another thing the supporters say is, hey, look, if these people made a living wage, they would need fewer social services like Medi-Cal, and it would save our economy. It would. So anyway, that's.
Thank you, Cynthia. That was great. So, yes, we'll skip ahead to Prop 4. Fatima Iqbal-Zubair has joined us. Good to see you again. Fatima is chair of the the State Party Progressive Caucus, and here to talk about Prop 4, the climate bond.
Do I just have a few minutes, right?
About 5 minutes.
Yeah, I could take questions too. I won't, so something I want to drop in the chat as you guys look at this, because a lot of people are asking like, what's in the bond? So before I start, oops. Okay, I just did something. I'm going to try to include this file here so you all can see what's actually in the bond. Let me see this. Oh, okay. It's going to include a few other things, so ignore that, but I'm trying to, let's see if this will open. Sorry, it's kind of a zip file, so hopefully that'll open. It actually has some other things in it, like our priority list of environmental voters, which is really cool too. But yeah, so the climate bond Prop 4, I'm here to say, please, I hope your club endorses it, and I'm going to give you some reasons why. So first, we're in a budget deficit. A few years ago, like our state made a promise to like have a climate budget, right? And a lot of that has been cut over the past few years. Like we're like 9 billion or something off of that. And you all know from, sure in your long weekend, you probably saw wildfires, and you've seen, my parents live in Texas. Their power was out because of the in the county they were in. And they're like, very elderly. So I was really worried about them. And here's
Your connection is really bad right now.
Wait, right? It's going to keep destroying homes, destroying
Fatima,
lives.
your sound is cutting in and out.
Over. The other thing is the impact that has. Oh, could not hear me? Am I back?
I wonder if you
Okay,
should
I'm gonna try to switch
maybe.
to my hotspot. 1 second.
Okay.
It's in the house now. Because of the extreme heat.
We can also turn off our videos to get her better. Maybe it works better.
I switched to my hotspot. Is this better?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. What's the last thing you guys heard?
The extreme heat.
Quite a bit there. Yeah.
Your parents got the electricity was off, and I didn't hear anything after that. And they're elderly. Yeah, that's it.
Yes. Oh, wow, really? Okay, so I was just saying, yes, climate disaster. Okay, I was talking about how California is also in, is in a budget deficit, but like climate disasters are not going to wait. And the next thing I was saying was, yeah, so basically, essentially, this is why we need to like invest in climate. The other argument in support is that it's going to cost us more to deal with climate disasters like wildfires and extreme heat, in terms of like mitigating the impacts of extreme heat and just so many other impacts from global warming, right? So that's going to cost taxpayers more money. The third argument is climate actually polls well. There have been polls done on, would people support a climate bond? And the answer is yes. It's something like 60% of people would. So it's a very popular issue. because it's a, people always wonder like, well, is this even going to pass, if we invest in it? But the thing is, like, there's really good data to show that it is going to pass. So let's see, what other arguments could I say? The other thing is, yes, 100%. And I'm seeing some of the stuff in the chat here. Hi, Matthew. Nice to see you. So here, let me get into what the climate bond has now. So I gave all the arguments for why, you should support it and why it's really needed. Here's why. Let me try to open up it on my end. I sent a file with the breakdown, but let me talk about what it's going to include. So the reason that, my organization, Enviro Voters, but I personally am, like, this is our top priority, is we were really fighting for environmental justice priorities in this bond. And 40% of the 10 billion are going to vulnerable communities. So think of like rural communities, communities that don't usually have the money to, fight the impacts of climate change. So those communities are going to get 40% of this. And it was actually a battle. It wasn't going to be 40%. And, advocates in Sacramento really fought for that, and we got it. So the amazing thing about this bond, if you want to look at the breakdown, I can share my screen. Would that be helpful? Oh,
Just a second, I'll get that going for you.
Oh, I think it shows I can share. So can go ahead and, actually says host disabled. Never mind.
Yeah, let me fix that.
No problem.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Okay, let me try. Okay, so here, all right. Okay, so this has a breakdown, and I put this in the chat of what the climate bond includes, but you can see the breakdown right here. 10 billion, 3.8 billion for safe drinking water, drought, flood, and water resilience, right? Which is what we need. We're in a drought. We've probably heard of homes that are at threat for, because of rising sea levels and flooding. And water resilience, we don't have clean drinking water all over the state. Wildfire and forest resilience, 1.5 billion. Sea level rise and coastal resilience, 1.2 billion. Protecting biodiversity and accessing nature-based climate solutions. That's really important. We have something in California called 30 by 30, which is 30%. We made a commitment globally that 30% of our biodiversity in oceans and land will be protected by 2030. And so this will help us get there, making sure we use nature-based solutions, not solutions like hydrogen or, solutions that the environmental communities like kind of iffy about, like direct air capture and things like that. But nature-based solutions are like more trees, like preserving our forests, because they're actually carbon sinks, right? 850 million for clean air, park creation and outdoor access, 700 million. Climate smart, sustainable and resilient farms, ranches, and working lands, 300 million, and extreme heat mitigation, 440 million. You can see the breakdown right here. I'm not going to go into all this, but specific districts got money. So your community might have gotten specific money, or districts can apply if, to pools of money. So that's kind of how it's going to work. Yeah, there's a large amount of money here, which is good for port. If you've heard of offshore wind, I know, Matthew, I think in your district, there's some discussion on like, is this good? Is this not? So we totally get that we need it done right. And I agree with that. And we need to transition to renewable energy. But there is money here for offshore wind, which is good. Transmission, battery energy storage. Okay, I'm going to pause. I see some potential questions. Hi, Alfred.
Hello.
Ronnie and Tom.
Yeah, Ronnie or Tom, please go ahead.
Yeah, but can I put?
Okay, is any of that money going to go for homes that are on the coast that get inundated, and then they get $6 million loans and all that stuff?
Inundated? Do you mean like from like? Are you talking about like home insurance or what?
Yeah, destroyed.
Yeah, for like from wildfires, right, and flooding and stuff.
No,
No, not wildfires. If the ocean blows them away, and then they get big loans to build another $6 million house, I don't want to pay for that.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So this bond, there was talks, Ronnie, Tom, right?
Tom.
Okay, there was talks about making this a housing and climate bond, but this is so sad, but the housing bond, housing issues were not polling well for a bond, because our state has spent a lot of money, but we all know it hasn't been accountable, transparent. We haven't seen much difference. So not inclined for a housing bond, not to say we shouldn't have policy, right? So for that reason, they did have that conversation, but they were like, housing stuff is not in this bond. But the good news is the stuff that would protect your home, right? And from things that would threaten it, like natural disasters, like is what we're going to mitigate here. So yeah.
Thanks. So
Rick?
Rick or Rebecca, and then we'll need to move on to Alfred because he's going to have to leave in about 6 minutes, I think.
Hi, this is Rebecca. Thank you for your report. And naturally, this is a hugely important, I don't know, basket of issues, really. And yes, and I'm sure I'll vote for it. My question is, who will implement it?
Mhm.
And it's one
Yeah,
thing
very
to know
good
the
question.
percentages of
Yeah.
this or that, but who will implement it? Who will, watch over it and make sure that all of these things, these allocations actually occur and so on?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I don't know if I have the complete answer for you because I was focused on like what's in the bond and like passing it and stuff like that. But I do know, like, since this is a state bond, if it passes, it's likely going to be like Alfred, you might know. I think Alfred knows all the ins and outs of bonds. So might go to him to answer this one if he knows, but it might be like our state controller. There's also state agencies that do this work, like the Natural Resources Agency, right? So I'm sure implementation usually goes to the agencies. So they're likely going to be accountable. I don't know who the single person is that's going to implement it, which is a very good question. I'm actually going to find out. Alfred, do you know for bonds, like who makes sure?
I think it's either state controller or treasurer that ultimately has oversight.
Okay, thank you.
I know a lot of this is going to the Office of Emergency Services and CAL FIRE for a lot of like the wildfire programs and things like that. But it will be monitored by the state controller, like who distributes all the money. But I mean, these are to directly fund certain agencies that are working in this field. So
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
That's a very good point. Yeah, you're right.
So I'm gonna go to switch this over to Alfred now to talk about Proposition 33 because I think he is on a clock.
Yep. Thank you.
I really appreciate all y'all showing up. This is, it's great to be able to call on such statewide experts. So Alfred, I am not sure what office or position you currently hold, so please say a little bit about yourself and get into the business.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Alfred. I'm with the California Democratic Renters Council. We work at the state level on supporting tenant-friendly legislation and affordable housing. And we are also supporting Prop 33 along with the California Democratic Party. So what does Prop 33 do? It's also known as the Justice for Renters Act, and you may have seen ads for this in the last few years. And it allows cities and counties to expand rent control and tenant protections. And the reason we have this law is that back in 1995, there was a state law called Costa-Hawkins that was passed that really limits a lot of what local cities can do to protect their tenants. And we've been stuck as a result. So for example, if there are people who live in houses owned by large corporations, they have no protections. If there are people living in newer buildings, and often in this case, newer buildings means buildings from the 1980s and onwards. So we're talking buildings 30, 40 years old. They also have fewer protections than other people. And so this is really giving individual cities the option to close those loopholes. And so for that reason, the California Democratic Party has supported yes on 33. Now, some of the landlords obviously are trying to spread some doubt about this measure. They claim that this measure would allow conservative right-wing cities to block housing production, but they're just making this up. If you look at who's opposing Prop 33, one of the top opponents is the California Republican Party. So don't fall for the landlord lie that conservatives are going to want to use this bill for bad reasons, because ultimately it gives the control to the individual cities. So happy to take a few questions also, and I'll put some info in the chat as well.
Awesome, thanks. Does anyone have questions?
I just have one comment, if that's all right.
Yeah.
The California Apartment Association has already started their kind of propaganda push out against this bill, and spreading a lot of mistruths about it. And I know Alfred knows about this as well, but a lot of it is trying to fearmonger with small landlords, excuse me. And there's a lot of protections in place for that. So I just wanted to point that out. Thanks.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alfred.
Yeah, I would say also the time with these propositions is look at who's supporting and who's opposing and follow the money.
Thanks. I'm going to take the liberty of speaking next because I prepared Prop 34, which is really directly related to 33. Prop 34 will require organizations that are funded by federal pharmaceutical programs, have spent more than 100 million on political activities, and have more than 500 health and safety violations on properties they own to spend 98% of all future revenues on direct patient care. This is written to only apply to one organization, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. As a nonprofit, AHF can buy prescription drugs at a discount and be reimbursed the full price by federal programs when they're distributed. They make over $2 billion a year. And I should say that I picked this one because it is the weirdest of all of them. AHF has used this money to create the Healthy Housing Foundation, which buys property in Hollywood and downtown to preserve affordable housing and campaigns for renter protections. They are responsible for the current Prop 33, which, as you've heard, would repeal Costa-Hawkins. However, many of their positions are more controversial, even within the AIDS, healthcare, and renters' rights communities. The entire AHF-HHF network centers on its leader, Michael Weinstein, and his ideas. He is responsible for the successful 2012 ballot initiative that requires condoms on porn sets in LA County, and a failed one from 2016, which would have done the same statewide. AHF was critical of PrEP when it first appeared, but now is the largest provider of the drug in the US. AHF sponsored 2016's failed LA City Measure S, which would have created multiple obstacles to already approved development in LA. They've sued to block housing from being built behind a Hollywood Palladium, and they sued to block LA from adopting its housing element in 2020. In 2019, AHF attempted to save Amoeba Records from moving by having their building historically landmarked in order to prevent housing from being built there. Amoeba founder Mark Weinstein, no relation, opposed this because they could not afford to continue paying rent at that location, whether it was a landmark or not, but the store has now successfully relocated. In 2020, AHF hired Kevin DeLeon to lobby the LA City Council between March, when he was elected, and October 2020, when he was sworn in. A member-elect working as a paid lobbyist to the body they are about to join is so obviously unethical that no one apparently had bothered to ban it. In 2022, Weinstein and other AHF staff were the largest donors to DeLeon's unsuccessful mayoral campaign. Weinstein's housing policy can be charitably described as left NIMBY. In The Affordable City, Shane Phillips categorizes housing policies as stability, subsidy, and supply. AHF supports stability through renter protections and rent control, and subsidy by buying affordable units to keep them available to people at the bottom of the housing market, but opposes all attempts to increase supply because Weinstein believes all development that isn't 100% affordable housing for the lowest income group creates gentrification and displacement. Meanwhile, an LA Times investigation found unsafe conditions at multiple AHF properties and that AHF had aggressively evicted tenants over small debts and sued them for back rent. So AHF is pretty terrible, but this measure was created and is almost entirely funded by the California Apartment Association. They are worse. CAA has been a major right-wing force in California politics for decades, responsible for Prop 13, Costa-Hawkins, and the Ellis Act, and they've consistently fought rent control, renter protections, and development. The only one of Phillips' categories they support is subsidy because it puts taxpayer money in their pockets and keeps rents inflated. It's also clear that because this measure is so narrowly and arbitrarily calibrated to only affect AHF, it is about Weinstein's political activities, not about protecting patients, tenants, or federal medical programs. As aggravating as Michael Weinstein is, I intend to vote against this measure and hope the club will oppose it as well. Any questions?
Is this bill specifically only targeting AHF, or is it like written to be certain other healthcare organizations that includes AHF? Because that was my biggest confusion about it.
There is absolutely no other organization that gets money from federal pharmaceutical subsidies and owns unsafe properties. Yeah, they never say the name.
That's my biggest question. I saw that thing about pharmaceutical subsidies, and I didn't know if this would apply to other people or if this is really just applying just to AHF.
Yeah. I think they're probably not allowed to have a law that says this organization sucks, but that they can, very they can say, just target it.
Came pretty close to doing that.
And they do suck, but that doesn't mean we should have a law against them. Because anyway, so any other questions about this?
I believe Aggie Kessler at the CADM Resolutions Committee, who discusses propositions, started off the meeting considering this proposition with Michael Weinstein is a stinking rat. So I think it's about him.
Is that the opposition that CAA is using, is kind of so many people don't like Michael Weinstein, so that's what they're trying to push?
The argument,
I'm so confused by this proposition.
The argument in favor of this proposition is organizations that get federal healthcare money should spend it on healthcare.
Yeah,
which sounds like a pretty good argument, but it's so narrowly targeted that it's just payback from CAA for all the stuff he's tried to do for renters.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for listening to my rant. The LA Times did great reporting on this. I will talk trash about the LA Times most of the time, so they really nailed the reporting on this. Cynthia?
Oh, I just want to say it sounds so analogous to the Supreme Court carving out an exception to the Insurrection Act. I mean, so that it only applied to Donald Trump. They didn't have to say in the decision, we want Donald Trump on the ballot, so go pound sand. But it was targeted. That's what it sounds like to me. Sorry for my rant.
So let's get back on the schedule. We had Prop 35, Gina Harris. This is a Medi-Cal funding initiative. I'm sure Gina can explain it much better. Let me spotlight you.
Thank you. Okay, hello, good evening, everyone. So this proposition, Prop 35, has bipartisan support from both parties. Now, if that doesn't just make you say, what? Like, it's like if literally some political party supporters, California Democratic Party, Republican Party of California, I think I jumped into the Hadron Collider and hit a different dimension, because what the hell is the Republican Party supporting healthcare for? However, broken clocks are right twice a day, so this one is one of those times. Anyway, Prop 35. So Prop 35 is also called it's the Funding for Medi-Cal Health Services Initiative Statute. This makes permanent the existing tax on managed care health insurance plans that's currently set to expire in 2026. Excuse me, guys. The state uses this money to pay for healthcare services, like for low-income families, children, seniors, people with disabilities, people that qualify for Medi-Cal. and requires the revenues from this tax to be used only for specified Medi-Cal services such as primary and specialty care, emergency care, family planning, mental health, prescription drugs. It prohibits revenues from being used to replace other existing Medi-Cal funding. So you can't just take this money and use it to replace other monies. This is in addition to the monies. And then it caps the admin expenses and requires independent audits of programs receiving the funding. And so Medi-Cal, as you guys know, like I said, is for, our low income or most vulnerable populations. It's something I see very often. And the MCO or managed care organizations, those are your insurance plans that got into Medi-Cal. Now, I'm gonna keep my personal feelings until the end, but just a little history on managed care organizations tax. The first version of this tax in California was enacted in 2005 as a fee on all premiums paid to the managed care organizations providing coverage to Medi-Cal members. So that's where your Anthem Medi-Cal, Health Net Medi-Cal, LA Care Medi-Cal, et cetera. The second iteration was enacted in 2009, was designed to expire in 2011, but was renewed in 2012. This version was a gross premium tax on the total operating revenue of Medi-Cal managed care plans. It expired in 2013. Now, fast forward to now, the MCO tax that is enacted right now was enacted last year and is set to expire in 2020, next year in 2026. So this is asking to make this permanent. Now, why did this come about? I will tell you. So, and others have said it during these presentations, that there is a budget deficit, womp womp, COVID money ran out. And so what, unfortunately, me and Gavin are on the opposite ends of this one, because he is proposing the largest cut in this last budget proposal to undo this multi-billion-dollar deal that he made with for Medi-Cal. So he wants to basically take back the $6.7 billion that he had earmarked to increase Medi-Cal payments to healthcare providers, and instead use that to help the kind of ballooning budget deficit that we have. And so, he is also saying that, hey, look, I expanded Medi-Cal to, so many people, we're going to maintain that. But however, the problem is with Medi-Cal, if you are a provider or work with Medi-Cal patients, reimbursement rates are decades too low and have not been adjusted to take in for, the, cost of just everything. The cost of even paper has gone up more than the Medi-Cal reimbursement rates have gone up. So with that, most Medi-Cal reimbursement rates have not been adjusted in more than a decade, and some providers have not seen payment increases in over 25 years. As a result, doctors and other healthcare providers struggle to take on new Medi-Cal patients. And in Medi-Cal, patients in some areas or even entire communities have faced loss of access to critical or emergency care or labor delivery services. For example, Centinela Hospital closed their labor delivery unit recently and has caused a labor delivery desert in the Inglewood, South LA areas, Gardena, Hawthorne. There's nothing there, right? Until you get to MLK St. Francis, or up here to Brotman, God forbid, or to Marina Del Rey, UCLA, you know what I mean? So that's what's happening right now. So with this was created by a coalition called the Coalition to Protect Access to Healthcare. And from their website, they are a coalition of doctors, healthcare workers, community health centers, Planned Parenthood, health plans, emergency responders, and they are support the initiative to permanently use dedicated funding to help hospitals, hospitals, clinics, and doctors' offices stay open and serving those vulnerable populations. Now, the thing, I'm sorry, I just lost my, I had some fun notes here. So like I said, supporter-wise, both political parties, which, I mean, something about that gives me red flag vibes, but because it's like, well, how are the Republicans benefiting from this? But there is some benefit because like I said, the health plans are in it. And that's where my personal opinions start getting involved. I said I was going to save that for last. Anyway, union wise, we have SEIU. Of course, they're going to be behind us. We have the California Dental Association, Hospital Association. That also is a red flag to me. The California Medical Association, Primary Care, and Planned Parenthood. They have zero opposition. There's no opposition listed, at least according to Ballotpedia, but I could not find any in my own independent search either. And they have 11.7 million in the ready to go. So with no opposition and that much money in the bank, this is well primed to pass. And like I said, really the key here is that it's just in making a current tax that's already being done permanent, and it does give better allocation on where that money can go. This was clearly a response to, like, the risk of the money being taken away or being used for non-healthcare related things to help with our budget deficit. So I really don't have I could go on and forever and ever about this, but I think that this is the best of a bad situation, meaning that Medi-Cal recipients, which is growing because people's income, with, jobs being taken away or our income and inflation not really being able to make ends meet, more and more people are falling into Medi-Cal. On top of that, people are getting very much so sicker. I deal with them every day. Medi-Cal is a very inequitable system, right? People can't, like, for me, working in a high level of care, I see a lot of people with Medi-Cal managed care plans that want to come to this high level of care to get their care because they just found out they had cancer, but they cannot because they're in these MCOs, right? So my job and my big FU to the system is also making sure that I know how to work the loopholes to get it done. But if the rates were higher, more places, more higher levels of care may also start taking more Medi-Cal plans. And that will also eliminate delays in care for these vulnerable people. I call it death by poverty, because that's what's happening. A lot of women, especially with me working with gynecological cancers, a lot of women are coming in with advanced stage ovarian and even cervical cancers. And it's not due to the fact they didn't want to seek care. It's the fact that they couldn't and they got lost in the system, or their providers were booked out, or they just weren't taken seriously. And it's all because of their income level. And again, like I said, I call that death by poverty. I don't like it. But like I said, this is for me, since we could not get CalCare, I'll take one little piecemeal thing at a time, and say I would urge a yes on this. Like I said, there's no opposition. It's really already a tax that's already in place, and then it will be a permanent tax so that we won't have to keep going back to the Fed asking for permission every few years. And once this tax is enacted, they will have a dedicated fund, and it will create the access to healthcare fund, which will it's permanently separate of the general fund and any other state fund account. It will be overseen by the state controller. And it would create, like, I think a 10-person board or committee. And that board or committee would be appointed, though, by Gavin and by, the speaker and stuff like that, as most committees with the state are, which, again, that's a little bit of another issue I have, but, that's kind of a normal standard when you come to having boards and committees after these ballot measures are passed. And I see there's a hand up, Matthew.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate what you're saying. I think a broken clock is right, twice a day. The California Hospital Association supporting this is why the California GOP is supporting this, because that's a huge funder of them. And they are going to benefit from the rate increase, but also are going to benefit our rural health clinics, tribal health clinics, places in rural areas like you were talking about as well. So I think that's why you're not seeing any opposition to this, really. And it is a weird conglomeration of people coming together: labor unions, Planned Parenthood, California Hospital Association. But I think in the end, it does benefit everyone. I would have liked that committee to have been somehow elected or something like that, but it's not. And it will be appointed by the governor and the speaker, but I am also very much in support of this. Thank you so much. Yep.
Thank you, Matthew. Yes, I agree. It's, like I said, I am a, go hard for, I was always a supporter of CalCare, which would have eliminated all of the need for this. However, I do have to keep the reality, which is what I see every single day, especially like you said, people from rural communities, people coming from up there in Siskiyou County, seeking high levels of care. There is no high level of care up there. You go to San Francisco or you come down to me at UCLA. And those people getting to me are coming to me way too late. So they're already pretty much on their deathbed. It's too late. And it all starts because they didn't have access to that quality care in the very beginning. So I'm hoping with a higher reimbursement rate, we'll start chipping away at that slowly, but it will happen. So if there are no more questions, that is all from me. Thank you for listening. And I'll put the links to the chat in the chat of the information where I got it.
Thank you, Gina.
We're also just having a rural hospital closure crisis, and this is going to help support that as well. So I'm very much in support. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thanks. I should make clear that we're going to do our proposition endorsement vote in September because the county and city propositions have not shaken out yet. So this is just an informational discussion. And it's also possible that, more information may come out on some of these, although it does seem pretty clear what we all want to do right now. And it's also that we have a pretty light business meeting, so I'm not worried about going past 8 o'clock, which we've done. So last but not least, Leah Pressman to talk about Proposition 56. Or 36, 56, 36. 36,
Okay.
sorry.
And you are going to let me share my screen? Jeff? Okay. So I'm going to be speaking in favor of in opposition to Proposition 36. Jeff and I attended this amazing field hearing that Karen Bass did in 2018 to talk about Proposition 47 and the effects that it had. And it included people who had been affected by the carceral system. It included people who had written Proposition 47 and people who had studied the effects. And, Proposition 47 was not a major overhaul of the carceral system in California, but it was pretty incredible that we started to do something. Karen Bass said, California really led in incarcerating people. And we have, at that point, we were starting to lead in terms of reforming some of the things we had done. So Proposition 36 is the Homelessness, Drug Addiction and Crime Reduction Act. So that's, the name given to it by its supporters. It would roll back important reforms that Proposition 47, passed in 2014, had implemented. It would make a third offense of theft, regardless of the value of the merchandise, a felony punishable by up to 3 years in prison. It would make possession of fentanyl a felony, and it would impose treatment mandated felony the third time someone is arrested for drug possession. So there's mandated treatment here. So what's Prop 47? It revised the penalties for non-violent lower level drug and property offenses. Before Prop 47, prosecutors had really broad discretion. They could treat certain property crimes as felonies or misdemeanors as they wanted. Prop 47 made shoplifting under $950 worth of stuff a misdemeanor, always, and loosened some penalties for other property and drug crimes. And it applied retroactively. So people who had been sent away for long sentences could petition for a release or a sentence reduction under Prop 47. And the people who were writing Prop 47, a lot of them were located at universities and were researchers. So they really studied the effects. In its first year, Prop 47 was associated with a reduction in the state prison population of 407 people. And over the last 10 years, the reforms saved California over $8 million. Prop 47 mandates that 65.5% of these savings go towards paying for treatment services with the goal of keeping people out of jail. So again, more outcome data. From 2017 through 2023, Prop 47 provided more than 53,000 defendants with services such as mental health and drug treatment, as well as housing, job training, diversion, and legal support. Recidivism plummeted for people who completed a Proposition 47 reentry program. They had a rate of 15% compared with other statewide rates, which were typically between 35 and 45%. Also, felony drug arrests dropped. An initial study found that they fell by about 76%, and there was a reduction in racial disparities in arrest rates for drug charges. So who is supporting reform of Prop 47 in this Prop 36? As Alfred said, look at who's supporting this and who's opposed. The supporters are prosecutors and law enforcement leaders. The California District Attorneys Association, an organization mostly comprised of conservative prosecutors. The California Sheriff's Association, politicians like Mayor London Breed, the California Republican Party, and businesses who have put a lot of money into this: Walmart, Target, Home Depot, and companies like 7-Eleven. The supporters argue that tougher criminal penalties are needed to curb theft and fentanyl use, that addiction drives homelessness, that tough on crime policies reduce crime, and that mandated treatment is effective. And I don't buy one of those four premises. They may feel true, but the supporters don't have data that backs up these assertions. And the opponents, the criminal justice reform groups and human rights activists oppose this. California Attorneys for Criminal Justice, composed of criminal defense attorneys, the California State Democratic Party, and the Los Angeles County Democratic Party. Opponents say that criminal justice reforms and human rights activists say that it will lead to an increase in the state's prison population, which is extremely expensive. The California Attorney for Criminal Justice calls Prop 36 draconian. There's a quote from Elliot Curry, who's a professor of criminal law, criminology, law and society at UC Irvine. And he says the theory that people are homeless because we've been too lenient with drug addiction, I think I can safely say that I don't see one shred of serious evidence that that's what's going on. Sharice Kubrin, a professor of criminology at UC Irvine, says, I'm not aware of any data that shows a connection between Prop 47 and homelessness. Sharon Rapport, director of California State Policy for the Corporation for Supportive Housing, blaming the state's spike in homelessness on Prop 47 is preposterous. All of the changes that the ballot measure is proposing have nothing whatsoever to do with homelessness. There's a really wonderful editorial that was written before Prop 36 was Prop 36. It was just signatures were being collected by Megan Morris at UCSF. And she writes, the proposed Homelessness, Drug Addiction, and Theft Reduction Act would push Californians' incarceration rates back up. Even prosecutors in the state have opposed the measure on the grounds that it would regress to failed policies. California should reject the proposal and stand up against fear-based, evidence-absent approaches. If we don't, our prisons will become more crowded and cost taxpayers a lot. We risk losing another generation to the consequences of incarceration that we've finally begun to tackle. And there are my references. And I think Ronnie and Tom also had a question. Anyone else?
Yes, everything you said was true, and I really appreciate it. But you had mentioned it only saved California $8 million. It is $800 million.
800. Oh, sorry, misread that.
Okay.
Yeah. I stand corrected. And that's very significant. Who else is raising?
Haifa.
Oh, Haifa, yes.
And Gina. Well, this sounds like a MAGA ballot or and I was
agree.
wondering, yeah, and it concerns me because some people will buy it, and because they're always alleging there's crime is rising and what have you. How do you counter that when we try to convince people from like in the middle not to go that route?
Someone once said, if someone comes at you with feelings, then reply with feelings. And, you know, I guess I've been pretty factual here. So really, you know, discussing the kinds of harm that are done, not just to the people who are incarcerated, but to the sort of ever widening circles, their children, their families, to really hear the stories of people who, you know, have had their lives destroyed, and to really, you know, talk about how upsetting homelessness is and how much our prisons have been a fire hose, not just a pipeline for homelessness. The hearing was just so moving. And I think, you know, telling people's stories, because our prisons don't rehabilitate people. They actually, I think, contribute to people being desperate, and desperation really is a common motivation for people to commit crimes. Also, it's very important to know that homelessness may be associated with addiction, but homelessness can cause addiction.
Absolutely.
If you have to stay, I mean, it obviously, someone finally dawned on me. I was like, oh, of course. You know, say you're homeless, you are subjected to a lot of crime and a lot of violence. So how do you stay up all night? People start taking meth because they're in such danger being unhoused. It's very common. Or they might get traumatized while they're unhoused and not be able to manage the feelings that come with traumatic experiences. So they end up on drugs because they have no medication. So it's, you know, it is
very
associated.
Good point. Yeah.
But the direction may not be what they assume it is. But it's you know, it's obviously a challenge that we all face all the time, dealing with emotional arguments that are just, you know, fact-free.
I agree. And the subject of being the homeless, I mean, I agree. I think being in the streets will drive anybody off the edge. And in the streets of Los Angeles, especially, there's so many opportunists out there. And these poor these poor people that have no homes to live in, of course they're going to go that route because they're so scared.
Women are sexually assaulted. There are a lot of crimes against unhoused people. But I should go to Gina. I see has her hand up. And Rick.
Thank you.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, actually, this gives the, you know, war on drug vibes from the 80s. So you kind of already touched on what I was going to touch on, which was, you know, how to respond to this, because it is going to get a lot of attention. It's going to sound good because people are like the graffiti, those retail thefts, the smash and grabs. All of that's connected to bigger things, right? So the smash and grabs are connected to bigger crime syndicates. And actually recently they're busting those retail crime syndicates. So those kids busting and taking stuff, they're delivering it to bigger things. So do you punish the child for doing it because they thought it was cool for TikTok, or do you go after the bigger entity, which is usually not someone of color? Also, the war on drugs. So the fentanyl, do you punish the addict for having the fentanyl? No, you should punish the people supplying the fentanyl, which we know is coming out of China. So this is just, like you said, killing it with facts, but also responding to the emotion of it is really important too. And then also saying, what I would like to see, I would rather see the money and resources go to giving support to parents who are having trouble with their teenage children right now, through it with addiction and with these issues with behavior, then I would rather see them being locked up, because that's only going to continue to produce the same outcome that we've seen for the last 40 years.
Yeah, we already know it doesn't work. It's very interesting. You know, one of our candidates for city council was asked in his interview about whether he had ever committed a felony. And he said at the time when I had possessed methamphetamine, it was a felony. Now it's a misdemeanor.
So, Rick or Rebecca.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's Rick, and thank you, Dr. Pressman, for your analysis and report. I want to. This question presumes, or this observation and question presumes that I'm on the right proposition. Is this the one where Democrats in the legislature were working on an alternative proposal?
Correct.
And also where I've been reading the news a good deal, and these numbers switch around. You're talking about the previous 47, the new one will be 36 if it had gone on the ballot, that sort of thing.
It is on the ballot, yeah.
And then the new one's 36, right? To reverse. Yes. Well, anyway, my observation in the last 30 seconds illustrates my lack of clarity, but I think I'm generally heading in the proper direction to namely recommend to you as chair of the legislative committee, and you've met the chair of our board, Mr. Schwartz. You and he are acquainted, I think.
Yes, indeed.
And you may want to, it's a friendly suggestion, but very apt, and that is things are moving on this, and the legislative committee and the executive committee of the club, which you may need to take steps. You may want to get some authorization here tonight, be able to take some steps to let the club's view be known and get delegated from us tonight, because there's going to be specific legislation. They backed off the alternative proposal. The deal fell apart.
Right.
And I think probably the reason it fell apart is key people, some of whom are friends of ours, couldn't decide what to vote for and whether to push the green button on some things they really can't stand. So the specific legislation, which I think are 21 and 41 signature of the governor bills, and there may be a basket of them coming up. And the negotiation, I believe, is with the big department stores and so on and so forth. Whether
Are these Senate bills or Assembly bills?
Oh, that's where I'm going with this. I don't know, but I know this just basically from press reports. When they backed off the alternative proposition, they're saying to the funders of 36, the people that are trying to not pour money into this, which would eviscerate 47. Let's see what we can do legislatively to persuade you to not pour in a lot of money. I mean, from the retail business establishment, all these big companies.
Right. It sort of presumes that what they're trying to do.
My recommendation is that there's going to be a basket of these. And the club, and we have some influence. The club may want to be very nimble and use democratic process to follow this closely. That's basically my recommendation. That we've yet to hear the end of this issue.
So in this legislative season, they may do some gut and amends to create new bills to address retail theft rings and sort of appease.
Whether they use gut or amend or emergency sessions and so on. I'm a one-trick pony. I read some news stories over the last day or two about this.
Well, please share them.
And then, LA Times, a major source, Daily News has some things. The main point is that the club may want to weigh in on this.
Right.
This is really essential. What kind of California are we going to have? We're going to lock up a lot of 19-year-old and 18-year-old kids, and who are charging around doing things. I think Vice President Harris said it best. Their syndicates are going after the syndicates, but we've got to look at the legislation. And there are people in the process who will pay attention to what this club has to say. They don't want to get crosswise with us on this. So I recommend we understand our own power in this and follow it very closely. And I'd be prepared to make a motion at the proper time after all these reports are done, that we delegate to the executive committee, and you're on it, I assume, as a committee chair, delegate to the executive committee the ability to indicate the position of the executive committee of the Culver City Democratic Club on this issue having to do with this matter regarding 47. And this will all be done quickly, but we're pretty quick ourselves. Thank you.
So are you making a motion that the membership delegate to the e-board the ability to support or oppose bills that would chip away at 47?
Yes, indicating it's with the exact terminology. It's the executive committee of the Culver City Democratic Club, as authorized by the whatever day this meeting is, July 10th meeting of 2024, and so on. Never has it been more apparent. I wouldn't normally do this. I like to sound off on bills and jump in, and I may even differ from you folks on some of this, having some of it. But having said that, this is a big deal, and it's a moving. This is not over. This is a moving topic and a moving target. It happens to be very important.
So let me butt in and
do something.
Shannon also has her hand up.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to say is similar to what Shannon is going to say, which is that we are not in our business meeting yet. We are still having a program about the bills. So, but this is the end of the discussion of the ballot initiatives. So if there are no further questions about ballot initiatives, I'd like to start the business meeting, and then we can get into the this new business at the appropriate time.
Fine with me.
Tom has a hand up.
So Shannon, is there more or?
Yeah, in addition to that, I actually didn't understand how the motion was different from what the executive board already has the power to do. We already have the power to support things and stuff.
That's
just something to consider once we start the business meeting. But
Yes.
I think what he proposed is something we already can do. So I was going to go into the nuance, but I agree with Jeff. That should be under new business or under the political committee.
So Ronnie or Tom, did you have a question about Prop 36, or can we wrap the program?
I wanted to wrap it up, but I wanted to just verify that I got the right one for each proposition. So for proposition.
Well, we don't know, we have to vote, but the point is we've discussed Prop 2. And in the past, we discussed Prop 3. Tonight we did.
Yes.
And we discussed Prop 4. We discussed Prop 5. And in the past, we did Prop 6. Is that correct?
So the club is already on record for putting marriage equality into the Constitution, and for ending slavery in California.
Right, that's this one. And we discussed Prop 32 and 30. Did we discuss 33?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's the
Justice
one.
for renters.
Justice for renters, yes.
Oh,
And,
also, Ronnie, I put in the chat the LA Times Guide to Propositions, if that helps.
Great, thank you so much. And I think that's it.
And you suggested Prop 33 was a yes?
Yes.
Okay. And 34 was a no.
Correct.
35 was a yes. And
Well,
36 is.
But that's, the vote hasn't taken place yet.
Vote in September, we'll be able to return to this discussion. I'm sure there will be a lot more information on these. Some of them are more complicated. I think we've all gotten, turned around by some propositions in the past. So it's a little bit of time to shake out, but it was, it was kind of fun to hit them while they were fresh, I think.
No, thank you so much.
It was an excellent synopsis. Thank you, folks.
Well, yes, as usual, I agree with Tom. Everyone was fantastic. Thank you. And thank you for tolerating my less than fantastic spiel as well. So I'm going to stop the recording